Hello everyone, happy Thursday guys. It's very close to the weekend, so let's be in a casual, good-natured, light mood. And in this video I'll be talking about 5 things that INFJs cannot live without. Exciting stuff, hey? But before I proceed, let me proceed to my intermediate obligatory little bit of advertising. My book on the INFJ is out, The Ecstatic Soul, deepest look into the INFJ personality ever conducted. Available for less than $10, ebook and paperback format. If you'd like to support me, would appreciate it. All the links in the description box. Okay, so this is out of the way. Let's make sure that this nice little book accompanies me in this video. What are the 5 things that INFJs cannot live without? To be honest, there probably are more than 5 things, but these are the 5 things that intuitively, using my introverted intuition, as it were, I came up with. And please appreciate the fact that I decided to be a little bit less flagrantly, blatantly French than usual, and I decided to button up my shirt. So let me know down in the comments what suits me better, because I don't want to be lacking in modesty either. So the first thing that INFJs can't live without is not books. Maybe this is something that could surprise you. I would say texts. Of course, INFJs love books. And I would be surprised to hear an INFJ say in the comments, well, I don't really like books, I don't like to read. So I would say books could be one of the 5 items, but I want to say texts because I do also know of INFJs who are certainly very attached to a limited number of books, but what matters to them most is not the book as an artifact, at least not possessing like a vast quantity of books as artifacts, but rather the text they contain, the text that books make available. It could be essays, it could be articles, but something a little bit long, something that they get lost in to stimulate their introverted intuition. And also, in many cases, to stimulate what I would call extroverted feeling from a place of isolation, because INFJs always struggle, as you know, between the need to be projected toward others and the need to be alone because they're introverts. Books, texts of all sorts, fiction, can give a great opportunity to engage the FE function by accessing universal values through engaging with a text without having to actually meet people. Now, I talk about this in my book. I talk about this in chapter 2 of my book specifically, and I do suggest that ideally a middle ground would be reached. Developing your FE function only with books is not sufficient, but it can be a very useful way of engaging it. The second thing that INFJs cannot live without is people. And this is linked to FE in this case. INFJs, need people more than most types do. I mean, of course, this is partly because they are extroverted feelers, but there are specific reasons why they need people. They have NI insights because introverted intuition is their dominant function and it produces intuitions by definition. Oh, there's a little lizard outside there. It's very cute. It produces insights. The problem is introverted intuition is symbolic, subjective, chaotic to some extent. It is just as chaotic as extroverted intuition, except it's less noticeable because it's subjective. That makes it even more impenetrable to the outside world and to the INFJ themselves a lot of the time. It's very hard to verbalize an introverted intuition insight, but it's only by engaging with people that they can actually refine those insights. Sometimes the purpose of the conversation, the exchange, might not even be about the insights. And yet, by having communicative exchanges, eventually some sort of clarity is reached and they can move on. So that's one aspect. And FE in general likes to relate to other people, usually a limited number of good friends and family. So people, quality people, we'll see. The third aspect is an interesting one, the third thing that INFJs can't live without. I call it the best word I've been able to come up with, and I hope you will appreciate this, because it's a rather poetic word. It's sanctuaries. I think that every INFJ needs a sanctuary. And what I mean by sanctuary is any place where they can retreat, where they can be in peace, usually in silence, where they can stay for as long as they want, without having to worry about the notion of time. So it's a place where they can lose themselves and enter a kind of more spiritual realm where time no longer really matters. The mechanistic dimensions imposed on the demands of society and life in its contemporary postmodern incarnation don't really matter, which is why a sanctuary is a good word, I think, is because it transcends this idea of a place, as long as it's a place that they can retreat to and they can collect themselves. It's also a very useful way for them to collect the insights of their ani, let them mature further so that they be able later on, when they're again engaging people in conversation, to pursue those insights further once they've matured in the sanctuary. Now, number four, a fourth thing that INFJs can't really live without is art. And you may notice that literature, such as books, obviously that's a form of art, but I did want to give a special place to texts, fiction, books, because they are so important for INFJs. But art, if you think about it in its more sensory dimension, in its more visual dimension, I think is something that INFJs really, really look for. And if you don't really have a lot of art in your life, I suggest that you look for more of it, because sometimes from the perspective of someone who's very practically minded, art might be appreciated as from a traditional viewpoint, from a conventional viewpoint, without really understanding its value. But at least from an INFJ perspective, art is so important because art is able to convey certain forms of truth, certain forms of statements in abstract symbolic form about life, about society, that are not expressible in language. Can you see the analogy with intuition? There's a very, very deep analogy with intuition. When you combine this with the fact that art in a visual form provides aesthetic pleasure, you also get the key to satisfying the SE function here. So art is very important. And lastly, number 5, I could not really find a better term for this than natural things. They can be pets, they can be plants, any artifact of natural organic existence. Having that in your environment, I think, is quite crucial because it keeps you in touch with the world. So in a sense, it grounds INFJs to have these things in their immediate environment. It provides them with sensory pleasure as well, because cats are adorable, dogs too, plants are beautiful and green, and all these things are very important. The color impact is important. There's also a sense in which when you have life around you, that kind of life follows its own temporality, unfolds, not exactly across the same continuums as, again, contemporary postmodern society with its very instrumental demands and measured demands. There's a different kind of temporality where you can sort of step outside of that very pressuring, anxiety-inducing world and connect more with nature. And again, here there are lots of connections, I think, with the way in which introverted intuition expresses itself and where it finds its most obvious satisfaction. And so we have the 4 things. So I should say the 5 things. Now, one of the things you might notice is actually INFJs are, in some sense, minimalists. They don't actually need a lot to be happy and existentially satisfied, or to have the conditions to be existentially satisfied. There's only these 5 things. I think that that's sufficient. And if you don't agree, or if you agree, let me know in the comments. But just to emphasize that these are very fundamental, I just ask you, in conclusion, to picture a place where you have the people you like, the people that you relate to, paintings on the wall, plants. You also have books that are available that you can pick up, and there's a corridor that links to a sanctuary, like a room or maybe a garden that only you have access to at any moment that you want. If you have all these things concentrated in a single broad place, would you not be delighted? Would you not be happy? I ask you to ponder this question. In the meantime, give me a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, and I will see you, I think, most likely on Saturday. See you guys.